In the vastness of the galaxy, peace had reigned for eons. The advanced civilizations across the stars lived in harmony, their technology and military strength unmatched by any. No race had ever posed a serious threat to the balance. The alien species were proud, believing they were the rulers of the universe. But everything was about to change. It began with whispers. At first, they were just rumors, small, scattered pieces of information, shared in hushed voices across the galaxy. A new species has emerged, they said. They call themselves humans. But these whispers were not the usual tales of some weak, primitive race. They spoke of something different, something dangerous. In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, where the galaxy's most powerful leaders convened, the discussion started to grow tense. The representatives from various alien empires were accustomed to diplomacy and controlled power, but what they were hearing about these humans unsettled them. They had learned that humans were not like other species. Their armies were small compared to the vast fleets of the galaxy, but they were relentless, cunning, and strangely efficient. One of the most influential leaders, Grand Commander Zorath, of the Zelto Empire, had heard the stories of humans fighting battles with nothing but their willpower and sheer determination. He listened carefully as the council debated the nature of this new species. "They say humans are unpredictable," Zorath said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "They don't fight like us. They don't follow our rules of war. They just conquer." His words hung in the air, making everyone in the room pause. The other leaders exchanged uneasy glances. They were all used to controlling the flow of the galaxy, to keeping the peace through strength and fear. But these humans? They didn't play by the same rules. They didn't care about treaties or power struggles. They fought for something else, something darker. Commander Zorath continued, "We know their ships are small, their weapons less advanced, but they use what they have in ways we cannot predict. The reports tell of small human groups defeating much larger and better equipped fleets. How is that possible?" The Galactic Council fell silent. Each leader pondered the question, how could a species so young, so new to the galaxy, strike fear into the hearts of the most powerful beings in existence? They decided to take action. An emergency meeting was called, and a mission was organized to learn more about these humans and their so-called armies. The mission was simple. Send scouts to observe human behavior and gather information. They would make contact, but with caution. No one was sure what to expect from the humans, but they agreed that understanding this new threat was necessary. The council agreed that if humans were as dangerous as the rumors suggested, they would need to be dealt with swiftly, but nothing could prepare them for what they were about to witness. A small fleet of alien ships traveled to Earth, the home planet of humans. The scouts landed on the surface, observing quietly from afar. The humans appeared to be primitive compared to the advanced races of the galaxy. They had cities, but they were small. Their technology seemed underdeveloped, their weapons crude by galactic standards. Yet, as the scouts continued to watch, they began to see something that could not be ignored. Humans were not weak. They were not primitive. They were relentless. In a remote human city, a small group of soldiers stood ready for battle. The alien scouts were surprised to see how organized they were, how disciplined. They watched as the humans prepared for an attack against a much larger, better equipped force. Their strategy was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen before. It wasn't about numbers or technology. It was about tactics. Humans used the environment to their advantage, taking the higher ground, creating traps and setting up ambushes. The alien scouts saw the humans' fearlessness. These soldiers didn't hesitate. They fought not just for survival but for something deeper, a belief that they would win no matter the odds. The battle was over quickly, and when the dust settled, the humans stood victorious. The larger, more advanced alien force had been defeated by a mere handful of humans. The scouts were shaken. They couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. How could this be? How could such a small, seemingly unremarkable species defeat an enemy so much more powerful than themselves? The answer was clear. Humans were more dangerous than any alien race had ever imagined. Back in the Galactic Council, the scouts returned with their findings. Commander Zorath listened closely as they explained the events on Earth. His mind raced with the implications. The galaxy had always believed that strength came from numbers and technology, but humans had proven that strength could come from something else, something far more terrifying. "We've made a grave mistake," Zorath muttered. "These humans, they don't fear us. They don't fear anyone." And that, the Council realized, was the most terrifying thing about human armies. They didn't fear anyone. They had no limits. No boundaries. Their army might be small, but it was unstoppable. As the news spread across the galaxy, the whispers grew louder. Human armies are coming. And for the first time in centuries, the powerful empires of the galaxy felt a deep, cold fear settle in their hearts. The universe had long known the art of war. From massive fleets to advanced weaponry, every species had developed their own methods of conquering and defending. Yet there was one thing that all races shared: arrogance. No one had ever thought to question the strength of their own armies. The idea that a single, seemingly insignificant species could challenge that belief was unthinkable. But then, the humans made their move. The Zelto Empire, led by Commander Zorath, was the first to come face to face with the full force of human power. Zorath had been skeptical of the growing rumors about human armies. His fleet was the largest and most advanced in the galaxy. He had seen countless species come and go, all claiming to be the next great power. But none had ever matched his strength. He believed the humans would be no different. They would either kneel before the might of the Zelto Empire or be wiped out with ease. The Zelto fleet arrived in the human system, prepared to make contact. Zorath's plan was simple: observe the humans, assess their capabilities, and, if necessary, show them the consequences of crossing the line. But what they found instead was something they never expected. The first human warship that appeared in the galaxy was nothing like the majestic, colossal vessels that made up the Zelto fleet. It was small, almost unnoticeable against the backdrop of the stars. Its sleek black exterior reflected no light, as if it were a shadow in space, but it moved with an eerie precision, darting through the galaxy as if it knew exactly where it was going. Zorath's fleet deployed in formation, surrounding the tiny human vessel, ready to strike if needed. But there was no response from the human ship. It didn't signal, it didn't communicate. It simply hovered in space, its engines silent. Zorath's impatience grew. "We should destroy it now," one of his officers suggested, but Zorath held up a hand. "No," he replied. "Let's see what they do." The minutes felt like hours. The tension in the air was thick. Zorath watched through his ship's massive windows, waiting for the humans to respond. The silence was maddening, as if the human vessel was taunting him. Then, just as he was about to give the command to fire, something remarkable happened. The human ship made its first move. A single beam of light shot out from the ship, cutting through the darkness of space. It wasn't an attack. Instead, it was a signal. A message. Zorath's fleet watched as the beam struck the edge of one of the Zelto warships, embedding itself deep into the hull. The beam wasn't powerful enough to cause any serious damage, but it was clear that it wasn't just a random shot. The human ship had pinpointed the exact location to strike. Zorath's eyes narrowed. "They're testing us," he muttered. "This is a message." The Zelto fleet hesitated, unsure of what to do next. The humans had shown no aggression, but their actions were undeniably bold. Zorath's officers were on edge, but the commander had an unsettling feeling in his gut. It was as if the humans weren't afraid of them at all. Without warning, the human ship launched a second, more powerful beam. This time, the beam sliced through the side of a nearby warship, creating a massive hole in its hull. Sparks and debris erupted into space. The human ship had just crippled a Zelto warship with nothing but a single shot. "Attack!" Zorath roared. He had seen enough. The entire Zelto fleet opened fire, unleashing waves of energy blasts and missiles at the human vessel. The human ship didn't move. Instead, it launched a series of counterattacks, striking with deadly accuracy. It didn't use a single laser or missile. Instead, the human ship deployed smaller, autonomous drones, each equipped with devastating weapons. The drones swarmed the Zelto fleet, dodging blasts and taking out enemy ships one by one. The Zelto fleet had been built for power, not speed, and the humans knew it. They outmaneuvered Zorath's forces, picking them off with tactical brilliance. The battle was like nothing Zorath had ever seen. Aboard the Zelto flagship, Zorath's officers scrambled to launch countermeasures, but it was too late. The human drones were already inside their defenses. With terrifying precision, the drones disabled shields and weapons, rendering the Zelto ships powerless. Zorath watched helplessly as his once mighty fleet was dismantled before his eyes. His greatest asset, the Zelto warships, were no match for the humans' strategy. This wasn't a battle of firepower, it was a battle of tactics, and the humans had already won. In the midst of the chaos, Zorath finally realized what made human armies so terrifying. It wasn't their technology, it wasn't their numbers, it was their unpredictability. Humans had no limits. They would fight, adapt, and win, no matter the odds. They weren't just soldiers, they were warriors who could outthink, outlast, and outmaneuver any force that stood in their way. The remaining Zelto ships retreated, humiliated. Zorath's face darkened as he watched the human warship fade into the distance, its drones still circling the galaxy, waiting for the next challenge. As the remaining Zelto fleet limped back to their homeworld, the galaxy buzzed with the news of the unexpected defeat. The Zelto Empire, once considered the unchallenged rulers of the stars, had been bested by a species that seemed to defy all understanding. The galaxy's most advanced minds couldn't grasp how the humans had done it. They had outwitted, outplayed, and overpowered an entire fleet with nothing but sheer determination and a few small ships. Back on Earth, humans didn't celebrate. Their victory was not about glory. It was about survival. The leaders of Earth understood something the galaxy hadn't yet. The war was just beginning. The universe had underestimated their people, but now it was too late to turn back. Commander Zorath, still reeling from his defeat, had retreated to the Zelto capital. His mind was consumed with one question. What made humans so terrifying? What had they done that allowed them to defeat an empire like his? He had seen the human tactics firsthand, but he still couldn't comprehend the full scope of their power. It wasn't just their technology or their relentless attitude. It was something deeper, something primal. On the Zelto homeworld, Zorath convened with his top strategists and scientists, desperate to understand how humanity had turned the tide of battle in their favor. His best minds worked tirelessly, combing through every piece of intelligence about the human species, their history, and their military strategies. What if we are missing something? One of Zorath's officers suggested, pacing around the dimly lit war room. What if the humans are not just good at fighting? They've been prepared for this kind of war from the start. Zorath turned sharply to face the officer, his eyes narrowing. Prepared for what? The officer hesitated. They've endured constant warfare on their homeworld. They've been fighting amongst themselves for centuries. Perhaps this constant state of conflict has created a kind of warrior spirit in them. Maybe they are not just soldiers. They are born fighters. Zorath was silent for a moment, digesting the officer's words. Could it be? Humans weren't like other species. While other races had built their power through technology and vast armies, humans had been building something else, something far more terrifying. They had built an unbreakable will, a desire not just to survive but to dominate. Back on Earth, humanity had no idea the galaxy was trembling. To them, the war had only just begun. Governments and military forces had begun mass production of new warships, and Earth's leaders had started making plans for further expansion. The defeat of the Zelto Empire was only the first step. They knew that there would be more battles to fight, more enemies to face. But what they didn't know was that the galaxy was already starting to notice. Every empire, every force that had ruled the stars with an iron fist, began to fear the humans. They were coming, and they weren't stopping. The first race to make contact was the Vornak, a highly intelligent yet reclusive species. Known for their advanced technology and near-invincible defenses, the Vornak had long avoided involvement in galactic conflicts. But after the defeat of the Zelto fleet, their leaders realized that the galaxy was no longer a safe place. The Vornak sent a message to Earth requesting a meeting. The humans, curious but cautious, agreed to meet. The Vornak fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, their ships shimmering with alien technology. The atmosphere was tense as human leaders boarded a Vornak vessel to discuss terms of peace. The meeting was supposed to be diplomatic, a negotiation, an opportunity for the Vornak to offer an alliance or a truce. But what happened next shocked everyone. As the humans and Vornak exchanged pleasantries, a sudden explosion rocked the Vornak ship. The blast was so powerful that it tore through the ship's outer layers, sending debris scattering through space. The humans inside were thrown to the floor, but they were unharmed. They quickly recovered, only to find the Vornak leaders frantically activating their weapons. But instead of firing at the humans, they turned their guns inward, pointing them at themselves. It was a suicide attack. The Vornak, in a moment of utter terror, had decided that the only way to stop the humans was to destroy themselves. The Vornak leaders died that day, and with them, so did the idea of peaceful coexistence. This event, later known as the Vornak Purge, sent shockwaves through the galaxy. It confirmed what the humans had always known. Their true power was not in their weapons, their technology, or even their armies. It was in their will to survive, and their utter refusal to be defeated. Human armies, it seemed, were not just fighting for control of the galaxy. They were fighting to prove something deeper, to show the universe that humanity would not be crushed, would not be broken, and would not bow to any force, no matter how powerful. In the aftermath of the Vornak Purge, the rest of the galaxy watched, with growing fear as the humans made their next move. The once peaceful galaxy was no longer safe. Every empire that had once ruled with ease now found themselves questioning their future. And all the while, humanity continued to expand, to conquer, to rise higher with each victory, and the galaxy had only just begun to understand the true nature of human power. It wasn't about weapons, it wasn't about technology. It was about the heart of every human soldier, the unshakable belief that no force, no matter how powerful, could ever stand against them. Across the galaxy, the legend of human armies began to spread, growing with each passing day. The most powerful species in the universe, who once held dominion over the stars, were no longer confident in their superiority. The once proud empires found themselves questioning their place in the galaxy. What had seemed like a certain victory was now a looming shadow of fear. The humans, however, remained focused on their next move. They had already taken their first steps in conquering the galaxy, but now they faced a much larger challenge. They were no longer dealing with the Zelto Empire or the Vornak. They were facing the combined might of every major galactic force. The question was, could they maintain their momentum? Could their strategies continue to work against foes who had united against them? Human leaders, strategists, and military commanders were all too aware of the stakes. They knew that the galaxy's most powerful armies would no longer make the same mistake. They would no longer underestimate the humans. But that was exactly what the humans wanted. The key to their power was not just their military strength, it was their ability to think, to adapt, and to strike where their enemies least expected. On Earth, a secret council of military leaders gathered in a hidden underground facility, far from prying eyes. These leaders were the masterminds of the human war machine, the ones who had orchestrated every victory, every triumph. Their mission was clear. They would have to rethink their strategy, adjust it to the new reality. If the galaxy had united against them, they would have to find a way to divide their enemies. Now that we have their attention, it's time to make them fear us even more, General Hawk said, his voice low but filled with determination. He stood at the head of the table, a map of the galaxy projected before him. Our strength is in our unpredictability. The The moment they think they have us figured out is the moment we strike. We need to hit them where it hurts the most. The generals around the table nodded in agreement. For the first time in history, humanity was unified under one common cause, conquering the stars. But this was not a battle for domination in the traditional sense. This was a battle of minds, a battle of tactics and deception. General Hawk continued, "We won't overwhelm them with numbers. We'll overwhelm them with fear. We'll force them to make mistakes. We'll make them fight battles they cannot win. And when they do, we strike swiftly and decisively." The human strategy wasn't about brute force. It wasn't about gathering the largest fleet or creating the most powerful weapon. It was about using their enemies' strengths against them. Every alien species had its own methods of war, its own methods of thinking. The humans, however, knew how to exploit their weaknesses. The strategy was simple, but devastating. Divide and conquer. The galaxy's once unified front would be fractured by creating internal conflict, distrust, and confusion among the various empires. The humans would play on their enemies' fears and rivalries, forcing them into a game they couldn't win. The first step was to target the weaker links, the species that were not yet fully aligned with the dominant galactic powers. These races, who had once been too insignificant to worry about, now found themselves in the crosshairs of humanity. The humans made calculated alliances with smaller factions, promising them protection and power in exchange for loyalty. They used subtle tactics to manipulate these races, pushing them into conflict with their larger neighbors. Meanwhile, the humans had already begun deploying their most innovative strategy yet, psychological warfare. While their enemies were focused on defending against traditional military tactics, humans launched a series of propaganda campaigns across the galaxy. They broadcasted images and messages of human strength, bravery, and unwavering determination, playing into the minds of their enemies. The humans didn't just want to defeat their enemies, they wanted to break them. They wanted their enemies to doubt themselves, to second-guess every move they made. The galaxy's leaders were quick to notice the growing unrest. The once calm, peaceful societies began to experience fractures. Tensions rose, alliances faltered, and trust became a rare commodity. Where unity had once been their strength, now it became their downfall. On the battlefield, the humans fought, with a new kind of precision. Their tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They would strike swiftly, then disappear without a trace, leaving their enemies unsure of what had happened. The humans had mastered the art of guerrilla warfare, and they used it to their advantage, disappearing into the shadows before their enemies could retaliate. Human warships, which had once been small and inconspicuous, had now evolved into highly advanced, stealthy vessels that could infiltrate even the most secure defenses. These ships would strike at key targets, military supply lines, communication hubs, and resource-rich planets, and leave before the enemy even realized what had happened. The humans didn't just want to win battles, they wanted to destabilize entire empires from within. The most terrifying aspect of the human strategy, however, was their ability to predict their enemies' next moves. Through careful observation and analysis, they had learned how to read their enemies like open books. They knew where the weaknesses were, and they knew how to exploit them. It wasn't just about outsmarting their enemies. It was about getting into their heads and making them question their every decision. In the heart of the galaxy, the leaders of the great empires began to panic. The once untouchable Zelto Empire was now scrambling to defend itself against these unpredictable humans. The Vornak, once known for their near invincibility, were now suffering losses they couldn't explain. And the once mighty Brixar Dominion was on the verge of collapse. Humanity was no longer just a threat to be dealt with. They were a force to be reckoned with, a force that had already begun to change the galaxy forever. As General Hawk looked at the galaxy map, he knew that this was only the beginning. The war was far from over. But with the right strategy, humanity could not only survive, it could conquer the stars. As the galaxy reeled from the unpredictable and brutal onslaught of human tactics, a profound shift began to take place. The once proud empires, Zelto, Vornak, Brixar, and many others, had always thought themselves at the pinnacle of power. They ruled over entire star systems, with fleets that could annihilate entire civilizations with ease. But now, they found themselves fighting a war on multiple fronts, not just against armies, but against a new kind of force. A force that didn't play by the rules. Humanity's advance had been like a storm, sudden, fierce, and unstoppable. The Galactic Council, the very institution that had once ensured peace and order, was now on the brink of collapse. The alien leaders who had once been so confident in their superiority were now desperate, grasping for any strategy that could stop the rising tide of human power. In the council chambers, leaders from the greatest empires gathered in secret. Their once unified front had cracked. The Zelto Empire had lost several key systems, the Vornak were retreating, and the Brixar Dominion was on the verge of collapse. But the most chilling realization of all was that humanity wasn't just conquering, they were uniting. They were turning allies into enemies, and enemies into allies. They were sowing fear across the galaxy, and that fear was spreading faster than anyone could stop it. "We can no longer ignore the truth," Grand Commander Zorath of the Zelto Empire said, his voice dark and weary. "Humanity has become more than a threat. They are a plague, a disease that will spread unless we do something." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. The leaders around the table nodded grimly. They had seen the signs. Human fleets appearing out of nowhere, sudden attacks that crippled entire worlds, and the eerie silence that followed. The galaxy was changing, and not in their favor. "I have spoken to our allies," Queen Marasha of the Vornak said, her voice cold. "We must act before we are all consumed. But we must be careful. The humans are not like us. They don't fear death, they embrace it. They fight with a resolve that we cannot match. If we attack them head-on, we will lose." "What choice do we have?" Chancellor Vrex of the Brixar Dominion retorted, his frustration evident. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to tear us apart." Zorath raised a hand, silencing the room. "We don't have to attack them directly. We need to hit them where it hurts, their own weaknesses. We need to make them fear us." The room fell silent as Zorath's plan began to take shape. They would not confront the humans directly. Instead, they would exploit the one thing the humans feared, their own vulnerability. A new strategy was born, one that aimed to break humanity's will. They would target Earth itself, the heart of humanity's power. If they could destroy Earth, they could destroy the humans. Without their homeworld, the humans would have nothing left to fight for. The empires would finally have their victory. But the galaxy's leaders had underestimated one thing. Humanity's greatest strength was not in their homeworld, but in their hearts, and this plan would backfire in ways they could never have imagined. Back on Earth, humans were already anticipating such an attack. As their influence in the galaxy grew, so did their intelligence network. They knew the alien empires were closing in, but instead of retreating or preparing for traditional defense, they embraced the challenge. Humanity's leaders saw it as an opportunity to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. President Olivia Marshall stood before her military advisors, her eyes focused and sharp. "The galaxy thinks they can break us by attacking our homeworld, but they don't understand. Earth is not just a place, it's a symbol. Our strength doesn't come from the planet itself, it comes from us." Her words struck a chord with her advisors, and they quickly began formulating a counter-strategy. They knew that the galaxy's greatest empires might be capable of inflicting damage, but they also knew something else. The more the aliens attacked, the more human resolve would grow. "We will strike first," General Hawk said, his voice steady. "We won't wait for them to come to us. We will show them that the humans they fear are not just warriors, they are unstoppable." The decision was made. Human forces would take the battle to the alien empires. They would go to the heart of the Zelto, Vornak, and Brixar systems and cripple their supply lines, their communications, and their ability to fight. The message would be clear. You attack Earth, you lose everything. Human ships, sleek and powerful, blasted, Off from Earth's atmosphere, their mission set. No one in the galaxy had ever seen anything like it. In a matter of days, human fleets appeared at the very edges of the Zelto, Vornak, and Brixar empires. They struck swiftly, crippling supply ships and disabling entire defense networks. They attacked where their enemies were weakest, showing no mercy, leaving the enemy forces bewildered and demoralized. The fear that humanity had instilled was now taking its toll on the alien empires. The once mighty fleets began to retreat in the face of the humans' relentless attacks. Even the most powerful empires were forced to reconsider their strategies, their alliances, and their very existence. And then, the final blow came. A coalition of human warships appeared in the heart of the Zelto system. They did not fire their weapons, they simply held their position. For hours they sat in silence, watching the Zelto fleet retreat. The humans had once again turned the tables. They had not just won the battle, they had won the galaxy's greatest fear. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. The human armies are no longer a threat. They are a force of nature, and nothing will stop them. In the end, the greatest fear of the galaxy had become reality. Humanity had not only survived, they had conquered. The once proud empires now looked to Earth, knowing that they were no longer the rulers of the stars. The galaxy belonged to the humans now, and the universe would never be the same.